it can only be the result of leverage or delusion. Something has a set of priorities that it has not shared, and it has the leverage to make those priorities manifest.
So recently, Bret Weinstein was on my friend Liberty Lockdown's podcast, that's Clint Russell, talking about how Trump has been a major disappointment. He cites a few examples as to why he believes that, some of the missed opportunities and broken promises, and actually gets to the root of it. He provides some explanations for what he thinks is at work here behind the scenes. So let's get his take on that. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Even though I don't think my expectations were extremely lofty, as of now, I feel relatively disappointed with the outcome. I'm curious what your grades are for him. I know that you were kind of more in alignment with him because of probably RFK Jr. and maybe Tulsi or something like that. What are your thoughts?
I am confused by what I see.
Me too.
I am completely comfortable with having voted for Trump. It was my first time because of the apocalypse that was represented by the blue ticket.
True.
And so I just don't think there was any rational choice. We had an absolute emergency on our hands, and the simple ability to vote for something that was in some way authentic made it the only game in town. Now, as for what is transpiring under the Trump administration, I am aware that there is a labyrinth of power and a hidden priority list. The administration presumably has things it wants to accomplish. The labyrinth of power sets the ground rules as to what can be accomplished at what rate and in exchange for what. I know I'm not privy to that. And so the real question is, how does this stack up compared to what was possible given the cards that President Trump held on inauguration? And I don't think any of us are in a position to answer that.
Yeah, probably very few of us are truly in a position to answer that, but we know the forces at play here. We know that the Israel lobby and the military-industrial complex have their claws deeply sunk into Trump. As far as what he said earlier, by the fact that we were presented essentially no choice, fair enough if you vote, but I can't see how Kamala Harris's foreign policy especially would be tangibly different from what we're seeing go on today. Maybe we wouldn't have even had a war on behalf of Netanyahu under Harris, because Trump seems more close to Netanyahu than Harris was, and that's no endorsement of Harris. She was a stuffed shirt, a stuffed suit as well, an obvious puppet of the deep state, but that's what we're having at play here too. So, if you believe, sincerely that your support in Trump was well placed, he should get criticism, because if you supported him, you obviously supported him for some of the good things he said, if you're in the dissident world, or if you really believe some of the things that you say. But we just haven't seen that play out. So yeah, there are forces that are at play here under the scenes, but at some point Trump himself has to be culpable in this. He's seen the evils of the deep state from his first term. They were lying to him about troop levels. Pompeo planned the assassination of Julian Assange. He appointed John Bolton and then apparently was disappointed by some of the things John Bolton did, only to, in his second term, appoint lots of other neocons and Zionists around him, like Marco Rubio and Mike Huckabee and Mike Waltz, etc.
So, is the disappointment the result of the fact that the constraints on the president are greater than we hoped and maybe imagined? Are they the result of the priorities not being the represented priorities? Undoubtedly, that plays some role. But, again, in light of what was, we had President Biden was not the president in the meaningful sense of that term. For them to have attempted to run him again, and then at the point that became implausible, to swap in an empty shirt is such a dire commentary on the state of the republic that I think Every conversation about how the Trump administration is doing has to begin with the fact that there was no alternative.
Yeah, there's
Well, there is no republic. There's just an oligarchy. I'm sorry to tell Brett, an oligarchy of a few hundred people and a few deep state operatives running things for everyone, creating the illusion of a republic or a democracy in which the people call the shots, which doesn't exactly happen when these powerful lobbies like the banks and big pharma and big food and big telecom and big tech and big military industrial complex seem to truly rule the world and rule the presidency. But yeah, he's right. Biden was a stuffed shirt. I guess he didn't get that memo that Biden's sharp as a tack. Didn't you listen to Joe Scarborough, Brett? I could have sworn like he alleged, and, he was emphatic about the fact that behind the scenes Biden was actually sharp as a tack. Well, yeah, no one buys that. The Democrats didn't buy that. The Democrats had to shield their laughter when that was said, in front of their ranks. And they had to try to, pivot to what they thought would be the answer. And I guess that was Harris and Walz. It's still mystifying, but, they dug their own graves there. But at the same time, we're getting policies that almost match those, I think we would also be getting, free speech curtailments on the internet under Harris. She talked about, and Hillary talked about, and AOC talked about, and Tim Walz talked about, and John Kerry talked about in the same week stretch how there need to be more policing of disinformation on the internet. Of course, the Republicans want to do that by creating special carve-outs for Israel on the internet and tend to go after people, targeting them, even if they're legal aliens, in some cases legal residents, like Mahmoud Khalil, to send him back to his home country if they're critics of Israel. But at the same time, I don't see much evidence that there would be real differences here.
no disagreement there. And they get really, like, the teeth come out when it comes to defending Israel. And it seems like a strange priority for a guy who campaigned on America First. What do you make of that? I mean, do you notice it at all? And what are your thoughts?
I mean, I can't help but notice it. And it's terrifying because it can only be the result of either leverage or delusion. And I tend to think it must be leverage. But either way, it is bizarre that we are placing the interests of another nation ahead of the interests of this country, especially under Trump's banner.
Amen. That's the Israel First lobby. That's the Israel First mentality. But I have to disagree with them to an extent. It's a combination of delusion and leverage. There's no way to just suspend Washington's leverage apparatus or Washington's delusion apparatus, and Trump embodies them both to an extent. But yeah, those are the forces at play here, and having another country first is kind of counterintuitive when your entire creed is based upon America first. Well, we've seen the real fruits of this administration, and it's typically Ukraine first or Israel first. That's truly what it is.
So I'm never-endingly troubled by indications in this direction. I don't think it's good for Israel. I don't think it's good for the world. I do think something has a set of priorities that it has not shared, and it has the leverage to make those priorities manifest under an administration that campaigned under the inverse. It's very troubling, and I don't know what to make of it. I think it is telling us that we have to find out why we can't escape this paradigm. But I did want to go back to one thing you said earlier, though. Mm-hmm. I think the de-escalation with Russia has two components, and you nailed one of them. We do have somebody who does seem to be interested in de-escalation. It's not a smooth road.
I don't agree with that. This is where I'll have to disagree with Brett, and if Clinton mentioned that in a part of the clip that I didn't include, yeah, I have to disagree. There's been nothing showing me that he's genuinely interested in de-escalation in Ukraine. If anything, the polar opposite, especially with deploying the nuclear submarines recently after, oh no, Dmitry Medvedev, the former leader of Russia, said something hostile. oh no, Trump wanted to do this the whole time. Again, the military-industrial complex is not an easy enough force to just wave away. They have their grips on Trump and continuing this war. And if you wanted to de-escalate, why appoint Marco Rubio? Why include Lindsey Graham in diplomatic parties that you're sending to meet the Ukrainians and or Russians, or Keith Kellogg? It's totally absurd. The only tangible difference in terms of policy between Trump and Biden on this is that Trump open negotiations with Russia. And I say no negotiations loosely because it doesn't seem like Trump or NATO is willing to give up anything in this. They're going to fight on, indefinitely over this fruitless war where Russia still controls the Donbass, and virtually no territory at all has been gained for over a year by Ukraine in their offensive in 2024. So Kherson, Zaporizhia, Luhansk, and Donetsk are controlled by Russia, and they're just continuing to funnel money down the throats of Zelensky, a corrupt oligarch who's imposed martial law, closed down Eastern Orthodox churches, expanded conscription, outlawed rival parties, and shut down rival news networks. What do you know? But it's for democracy, right?
But I think maybe even more importantly, we have a person who, old as he is in possession of his mental faculties, who can respond to an emergency phone call about things spiraling out of control with Russia and can de-escalate in an emergency. One of the things that I hold the Democratic Party responsible for, and that I would argue means the Democratic Party cannot be resurrected. It cannot go clean now. I will not accept the Democratic Party. One of the reasons is that they put a non-compos mentis figurehead in a position where he was the failsafe against a nuclear escalation. And then even more insanely, they escalated with that figurehead in that office. And so that seems to me so reckless, not only with the well-being of the Republic, but with the well-being of the entire planet, that even if I had seen no instinct towards de-escalation under Trump, which is not true, but even if that's what I had seen, at least having a human being who presumably does not want to see a nuclear war in a position to take the phone call, to take the various options put in front of him by his deputies, and to evaluate what the best way forward is in a crisis, even that is just a night and day difference from what the Democrats handed us.
All right, so with this, I can't take away the fact that, yeah, Biden didn't have his mental faculties at play. He was a puppet for the deep state, probably high-ranking, college attendants and aides were running the show at that point. The heads of the intelligence apparatus, people like Blinken, were essentially running the state under Biden. There's no question about that. But I'm sorry, I'm not that persuaded that Trump has the propensity to de-escalate. What we've seen from Trump, by and large, has been a history and a large amount of antecedents that show us that he's willing to escalate. In his first term, it was in Syria, where he put boots on the ground and expanded that war, which was fruitlessly started by Obama for the sake of deposing Assad, which is something Israel always wanted, and had the U.S. siding with al-Qaeda to do that, what was absolutely treasonous, the most treasonous thing I've ever seen from my government at that time. The arms flowed into the hands of ISIS and al-Qaeda, and guess what? That culminated in a regime change in 2024 in December, where now the leader of that country is a former al-Qaeda fighter. He founded al-Qaeda's affiliate in Syria. His name's al-Jilani, sometimes known as al-Shara. That guy was told he had a strong past by Trump, who featured him in diplomatic discussions, shook his hand, and that guy fought U.S. soldiers in Iraq as part of al-Qaeda. That's what happened there. Yemen, too. He vetoed an attempt to end the war in Yemen that came across his desk, used one of his only presidential vetoes to keep that war going. It's a blockade, a starvation blockade on the part of the Saudis. The Saudis no longer are attacking Yemen. They withdrew a few years ago. But that country has suffered immensely, 500,000 deaths there, and you barely hear anything about it. So that's just in his first term. He also ramped up bombing in Afghanistan in 2018 and 2019 before he did start to lay plans to get out of Afghanistan. That is true. And now in this term, he was willing to shelve U.S. policy aims in Iran for the sake of escalating a war with Iran on behalf of Netanyahu, who always wanted the regime change in Iran. We know that from the clean break memo. We know that from his constant clamoring for it, for saying he wanted the Libyan model to apply in Iran. Well, what is that? That's regime change. That's when there was a U.S.-led NATO rebellion against Gaddafi, an overthrow of Gaddafi. And now you have slave trading in Libya. You have Gaddafi's weapons scattered throughout sub-Saharan Africa. That was a disaster too. So you had him put regime change on the table in Iran. He Truth Socialed about it. And it was only because of Iranian restraint, not Trump's tendency to de-escalate, that we didn't end up with a larger war in Iran. Iran didn't want that war. It was the U.S. and Israel bullying them for specious reasons. They didn't have a nuke. Even the intelligence communities in both Israel, that's Mossad, and the CIA said that they didn't have nuclear weapons. And they've said my entire lifetime they're weeks, seconds, months, years away from it. Netanyahu's been doing it since 1992. So Trump has shown a history of escalation. And we're seeing it in Ukraine too. He basically just deployed nuclear submarines for the first time. They're letting us know about it. And this is stoking the fears and apprehensions and brinksmanship with Russia that we don't want. We can't take it. We need disengagement there. That's what will de-escalate. That is what will end the war. So I have to disagree with Bret Weinstein thinking that Trump is something of a de-escalation asset. I just don't think that. I think he's more inclined to follow the military-industrial complex and be led with his ego than he is to be led with reason and de-escalation and disengagement tendencies. But overall, can't disagree. There's obvious disappointment all around. His is more, I think, mediocre than my disappointment in Trump. I shouldn't even say that. I'd never had high hopes for Trump, but I don't think he's performing even as well as Bret seems. But I do like to see Bret, reveal the fact that he's disappointed. He thinks that many of the things Trump is doing can't be explained but by delusion or leverage. I think that's exactly right. It's just, I don't know that he's willing to criticize him as much as I would be. But still, I really enjoyed this discussion. Liberty Lockdown did a great job facilitating it. I like the full podcast. If you want to check that out, click the link in the description below. It was an excellent interview that covered a lot more subjects than just this one. But let me know down below. Do you agree more with Bret or me? Is Trump really a de-escalation agent, or is he more of the same when it comes to Washington foreign policy? What do you think Trump's biggest foreign policy blunders are, or what's eating away at him? Is it more, lack of Doge cuts? Is it in regard to the Epstein cover-up? Is it this? What are you most disappointed about? Let me know in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Also, please subscribe to Liberty Lockdown, Clint Russell's channel. He does a great job. Amazing content creator, super smart guy. Please follow him. And please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you can support my channel, and as a gracious thanks to you for doing that, I'll give you access to all of my videos before they go live on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.